Ready when you are.
Hello, John.
Matt, here we are again.
Here we are again. Where are you this time? Which are you still on your international travels, or are you
No,
back at home
in
base?
London. Back in London.
Excellent.
Yep. Blue sky. It's beautiful weather out there. It's Easter Sunday, so obviously I'm inside.
True to
recording
form.
recording a podcast about Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Reminds me of that the Smiths song. Is it Ask? Spending warm summer days indoors. Yeah, it's not summer, but yes, it's a lovely day out there. So naturally.
Perfect. Us and the rest of the Doctor Who podcasting community. It's a shared burden, but someone's got to do it. But anyway, yes, this is week 2 of I'll explain now, as I guess we are still continuing to refer to it. That the joke that accidentally stuck. And we are looking at yesterday's episode of Doctor Who, Lux, second series of season 2 of the Disney era of Doctor Who. I realised at the top, and we talked about this briefly when we did our Christmas special on Joy to the World, we should probably put a spoiler warning at the top of this, in that we do just talk about the endings of these things all the time, and we do it fairly casually. And I'm always at the view that if it's a 40-year-old piece of TV, then that goes with the territory. But if you plan to watch Lux and you have not done so yet, but for some reason you are listening to us instead of watching it, just be aware.
You're an idiot. Go and listen to another podcast. Like, seriously, I think that both our listeners are sophisticated enough to realize what's going on here.
Or certainly one of our listeners that you've not just alienated, but that's
we're back down to one listener.
We're back down to one.
Yeah, no, I think, like, caveat emptor. If you're listening to a review of an episode and you don't watch it first, that's really, I think that's really on you.
Well, there you go. You know where I'll explain later.
That's the warm embrace of the listener that I bring to this podcast.
Absolutely. Never let it not be said that you're a people person. That's yeah. That is how we go. Right. Well, look, you know what we think about spoilers. But what did we think about yesterday's episode of Doctor Who? John, would you like to attempt a potted summary of Lux?
Yep. Once again, if someone's taking a sort of time capsule approach to this and is listening to this eons after the episode went out, this was released on iPlayer and Disney Plus on the 19th of April 2025. It's called Lux.
Mm-hmm.
And it finds the Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa, and Belinda Varadasethu in the TARDIS, trying to get Belinda back home. For some contrived plot reason, the TARDIS is unable to land at the date that would get her home where she left off, and therefore they're having to sort of leave time beacons in other parts of Earth history to try and reel the TARDIS in, triangulate to land. And one of the points they do so is in Florida in 1952. They decide to don the garb and look all 50s. And they arrive to find a creepy cinema that's been it's been locked up, looked after by a creepy caretaker. I think the doctor says creepy caretaker looking after a haunted cinema. What's not to like? And that's basically the premise. The big the big bad in this is Lux Imperator, which is one of the pantheon of gods that was introduced in, well, I suppose introduced back in 1960 or whatever, but reintroduced to us during the 60th anniversary specials, and particularly The Giggle, where the Toymaker was reintroduced and dispatched. And we had, of course, Maestro in series 1 of the latest run, Sutek, and now, of course, Lux. So Lux is kind of a light god, basically. And through full moon sunbeam and bouncing off a spoon and all sorts of, and this celestial light ends up embedded into the projection of a cartoon, and this somehow conjures Lux into a terrifying cartoon figure. The kind of 1920s kind of coded with the kind of Disney Mickey Mouse pie eye 20s or 30s. Mr. Ringading, who's a grotesque figure to begin with, but beautifully realized hand-drawn animation. And this god has a really perplexing MO, and it's not really quite sure what they're after, except sort of to get bigger and to have more reach, which I suspect is, it's no mistake that there's been projection onto a screen. It's about gathering views, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, and the Lux has also zapped 15 people who were in the cinema a couple of months ago into some celluloid film. The Doctor and Belinda end up on a massive meta journey into film, into media, and then there's a whole kind of very Christ-like sort of resolution, something that Davis has done before, actually.
Yep.
And yeah, it ends up in quite a metaphysical place.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot going on. There's an exploration of racism in 1950s America, and through that prism, othering in any context.
Yep.
And what it's like to be othered. Mass media and how that is changing, and how updating media and rinsing IP can lead you into a grotesque place, which seems like quite a subversive thing to do on Disney Plus, and making fun of the kind of original source material of Disney's existence, which is animation. So like,
I have a lot of thoughts on this about, just how aggressively Davis is biting the hands that feeds here in quite in quite a pleasing way, I think. But yeah, not to.
But also to deepen, or to try to deepen, the relationship between Belinda and the Doctor. Give them a bit more of an emotional connection.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a huge amount through this to do with loss, grief, death. There's a mother who lost a child. She gets him back, thank God. Dead kids is never something I can jive in Doctor Who. But yeah, and then obviously the character of the projectionist, played by Linus Roach, whose wife has died, and he's offered sort of ghost-like reincarnation of her by Lux, because reasons. It makes sense in the plot, but like there's no point dwelling on it. Yeah, it's all there's a lot. This is like a proper Ribena concentrate of a Doctor Who episode. 44 minutes. It's really, dense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think I've encapsulated it.
Yeah, I think you did an excellent job there. Very thorough. That was because I would have just gone. It's the one where a cartoon character comes to life.
Yeah, I mean, there is that.
But yes, there is that version of it. Cool. Okay. Well, look, you threw to me first last week. Who wants to field this one first? What did we think of this?
It's interesting because it's funny you talked about spoilers, because we're recording this the day after, and I haven't managed to avoid reading some of the reaction to it. And a lot of people love this and think it's great and top tier. And I'm not here to piss on their chips. I think I can see why a lot of people like it. I liked it a lot more than Robot Revolution, a relatively low bar, one might say. But I felt this was broadly okay. I thought it was all right. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I thought it was okay. I felt it tried to do too much in 44 minutes. and ended up somewhat less than the sum of its parts as a result. I think that a lot of the hashtag RIP Doctor Who crowd will have really rolled their eyes at the meta stuff in the middle, which I actually thought was some of the strongest stuff in it. I thought that it was rather, one of the weaknesses of the episode was that I felt it was rather telling that when Doctor and Belinda jump out of the screen and end up in that world where there are the 3 Doctor Who fans watching it, and it all ends up kind of like 6 characters in search of an author.
Yeah.
And the care in the sketches of those 3 and the world. I mean, as Doctor Who fans or Doctor Who watchers, you're kind of attuned to what it is those people are, so you get a shorthand, right? But I cared much more about those 3 than I did about Belinda or the Doctor, frankly. Like it's I felt like the care and attention and the sketching that was missing in some of the extra characters in Robot Revolution kind of worked here, and I cared much more about them. Like when they realized they had to die, they had to end their journey, they had to sort of self-destruct. I felt that was much more affecting than Belinda moaning on about her parents or whatever. Like where I just feel like that, I still feel that hasn't been earned. Like when the Doctor and Belinda are converted into cartoon characters, I realise that part of the conceit is that they, for a moment, become 2-dimensional in every respect. So their language becomes very stilted and stupid, and then they work them well. But there are some there, but I don't think you have time in 44 minutes of the second episode for them. It feels very cheap for them to go, we're 2-dimensional, we need to be 3-dimensional, we need to be emotional. Okay, well then let's do an info dump where we can say what our base feelings are, so that we don't have to go through the motions of actually doing character development properly. I'm the last Time Lord, and I'm the last of my kind, and there are no more people on my planet Gallifrey. Boo-hoo. I really want to get back to my parents. And
it's a very high-risk strategy to draw attention to, a scene that is purposely 2-dimensional and advertised as 2-dimensional if elsewhere you are not littering this with rich 3D texture, I would say.
Yeah. And I think that that's true of, apart from the fans, I think the characters, like the guy who worked in the diner.
Yes.
Who was pretty heavily queer-coded, and like and Mrs. Lowenstein, is it? Yeah. Who also, I presume, is Jewish, right? Or has a Jewish background. So he seems to be foregrounding. Oh, they're also the kind of people who are in a diner at 4 a.m.
Yes.
And he references very heavily, of course, the segregation that was around in the south of the United States at the time. So there seems to be something of a kind of a desire to put these, for want of a better word, waifs and strays into a place where they can, a safe space essentially, right? And that's commendable, of course, but like but I still feel like those characters. You know what this reminded me of so much? I just watched this thinking, wow, this is like McCoy Doctor Who with the budget to deliver.
Absolutely.
And I still and ultimately McCoy Doctor Who with the budget to deliver still, for me personally, is a victory of ambition over coherence.
Totally.
And so I felt this was super, super, super ambitious, and I really genuinely applaud that. I'm not damning it with faint praise, but I just feel like episode 2, with a new companion trying to do all of this stuff in 44 minutes, ended up not really satisfying any of the individual elements that well.
Yeah.
But there's so much going on, so I can see why people would find a lot of things to tick. It just didn't hang together for me.
Totally. It's really interesting, that point you made, because I remember, I think we maybe talked about this off mic last year, but I feel very much like the Disney era Doctor Who is essentially season 24 on steroids.
Yeah.
And season 24 is an interesting one because it's critical. So if you held shares in season 24, you could have bought at a very low period and be cashing them in quite now in terms of how its critical stock has risen. I think because, from something that was seen as the lowest of the low, I think now there's an appreciation of its, totally gonzo ambition and its desire to throw ideas at the screen, even if, a cold critical reading would say, well, does it really land these ideas, and does this really cohere as drama or television? And I think broadly, I think there are still season 24 haters, but I think, broadly that seems to be where the critical consensus is there. And I think it's very much the same here. I would say that I enjoyed this, but I'm not sure to what extent it worked. And I think it's very much like, I actually think this is more or less a note for note rerun with some shifts from The Devil's Cord, which is obviously episode 2 of last year's season. It very much exists to hurl ideas at the screen and some gonzo stuff that you've never seen before. So last year it was the sort of music made physical in a sort of Looney Tunes kind of package, and this year, obviously still Looney Tunes, still very much in this kind of like living cartoon kind of vibe. Even down to the sense that the action largely takes place in one room. We've got the Miami cinema here. Last year we had Abbey Road Studios. And as I think I've said, I think when we were discussing gods, I think around maybe it was our Enlightenment episode a few months ago as well, in terms of saying that I think one of the I would say hallmarks of the Russell T Davies gods is that they are incredibly easy to dispatch, for beings that seemingly do not play by all the known laws of our universe.
Yeah.
But so I would say there's tons of stuff in here that I really enjoyed, in that the design of Mr. Ring-a-Ding is great, and I'm glad that you picked up on the sort of grotesqueness of it, because I feel like I feel something made with less care would just make him a sort of cute cartoon character, whereas this really does sort of evoke a much earlier era of animation before these characters got cute and they're actually slightly horrifying. Complete with the eyes and the manic grin and the sort of slightly bandy limbs and things. So
if you look at a lot of those early 20s, 30s cartoons, as you say, even Disney, there's a lot that's sinister.
Yeah, they're grotesque.
Like deliberately. It's not like people not liking clowns. It's deliberately very sinister, right?
Yeah. But and as you say, then there's also a ton of other ideas. Like there's a ton of stuff about loss. There is the segregation backdrop, which I think I enjoyed your description last week of the manosphere stuff in the Robot Revolution as being treated in a slightly drive-by kind of way. And I think in a sense maybe some of those issues are here, but as well, but they're not being as aggressively foregrounded as the crux of the plot. And so I think it makes for sort of colour and nice moments in a way that really sort of adds up. I really did love.
I actually thought that this was more. I agree that this was more elegantly handled. When the Doctor says, there are times to suit up and fight injustice, and there are times when you've got to get on with something else.
Yeah.
And in that and while I'm waiting for others to catch up, I shine, which is a very elegant way, I thought, of Russell T Davies saying there are times when you must be an activist, and that's at the forefront of what you're doing. There are other times when you've got to go to work, pay the bills, walk the dog, and it's fine to have that space and have that focus and not be and not foreground that all of the time, but you can still make a difference by being authentic even in those moments. You can be authentically yourself, and that still is a powerful act of presence in the world. So I thought that was much more elegantly handled. I thought that the kind of Rock Hudson HIV stuff was a bit more drive-by, but fine.
Fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I noted that line actually where the Doctor says, "Yeah, I topple worlds. Sometimes I wait for people to topple theirs. Until then, I live in it and shine." Which that to me is probably some of the best stuff that Gatwa's been given as the Doctor. Yeah, and he really sings that in a way that, even though, to be honest, it's addressing a situation, particularly because, you know, the Doctor is a black guy now, and he knows that he's in a situation where, you know, he is the underdog. He's going to be on the receiving end of that kind of prejudice. It's a very different context to how it would have been done earlier, but actually, in terms of just really elegantly setting out a moral position, you know, it's the kind of function of dialogue that you could imagine being given to John Pertwee, and him sort of singing it really well. You could imagine a scene with him and Joe Grant in a prison cell at some point, where the Doctor sets out the moral case for what we're going to do and what we're not going to do in the moment.
I mean, that happened, didn't it? In
I think it happens quite a few times. Probably like Frontier in Space or something like that.
Yeah,
but
sure.
why not? But you know, that felt very, very successful. There's also a ton of actually like funny lines in it. Like he writes Mr. Ring-a-Ding as well. You know, a lot of those lines where he says, "Oh, I've immortalized them on film of all the people that he zapped up." That made me laugh.
Yeah.
The bit where he says, "I'm a two-dimensional character. You can't expect backstory," which is like, you know, it's written with the right rhythm. Alan Cumming, you know, again, is obviously having great fun playing this character. So there's like,
oh yeah, and he sings beautifully on
he
it.
does.
Like he you know, like, great set of lungs.
He knows.
I think Alan Cummings' voice work is great.
Yeah.
Noticeably better than Ncuti Gatwa or Varada Sethu's voice work. Although I know they're deliberately pitched at first, the two-dimensional thing, but like, it just sounds so awkward when they're doing the voiceover work for their animation. Also, just from a kind of production perspective, Mr. Ring-a-Ding is so perfectly realized as hand-drawn animation that the shocking lack of quality in the because I know it's meant to be referencing a different era of animation.
It's meant to be like Scooby-Doo, when, like, you know, Hanna-Barbera stuff was getting real cheap, I think, is what it's what it's meant to be.
But it doesn't even look like that. It just it doesn't quite work.
No, I agree.
But like, we could talk about loads of individual bits.
Well, this is the thing. Sorry, I was getting around to my point, which is basically to say there's tons of bits in it that I liked, and like individual scenes as I went by, I was like, oh yeah, that's fun. Loads of ideas. It's throwing loads of stuff at the screen. You know, it's really, you know, continuing in the sort of 50s design motifs that we talked about last week. You know, there's a real sort of retrofuturism going on here. It's so brightly coloured. It, you know, it looks great, but it just doesn't. It doesn't cohere into something that feels like just a satisfying sort of chunk of telly. It's a succession of sort of good scenes or interesting images kind of buttressed together. And I can't help but feel there's just something, and maybe you can help me sort of pin this down. There's something about where it chooses to put all the emotional emphasis within every individual scene that means that it really doesn't feel like it builds from moment to moment. Like, I mean, like you, I enjoyed the sort of meta stuff with the fans, and, you know, the conversation where the Doctor's saying, "What's your favorite story?" and they all just keep saying Blink, and he's trying to name other episodes. You know, I think they're all Davis episodes as well that he names, and they're like, "No, it's definitely Blink." You know, that stuff's cute. You know, why not? But the fact that they, you know, again, it only feels like we've sort of had this Sasha 55 again. We've only had them on screen for sort of, you know, a minute or so, but they get as much time doing their sort of emotional goodbye that, again, it's just like it just feels unearned. I mean, I did also, and we didn't really talk about this last week, like, I would say in episodes like this, which are sort of reliant, I think, on, you know, just letting the stuff sort of wash over you and you kind of going, okay, I'm having a good time, I'll let it slide. The relentless Murray Gold music, which hits just one tone continually throughout, like actively, like, I think at times sort of undermine, and, you know, any attempt, and this is where the sort of emotional stuff, I wonder if it was played a little more subtly in the production, whether you'd buy the sort of narrative compression of it, that, you know, yeah, we're having a long emotional goodbye for characters we met 2 minutes ago, but the dialing of everything musically up to 11, in a way that sometimes really does not feel like it's interacting with what's on screen. Sort of is
No, and
a problem, I would say.
I feel like the music. I'll start like right from the cold open. I felt like the music really threw me out of it. Like he was trying to do some Americana via brass,
Yeah,
and the way he'd orchestrated it, I was getting much more Northern Coal Pit than sort of Americana, and so I was like watching this, and it really threw me into oh yeah, this is probably in Cardiff somewhere, right?
yeah,
It just the music was just wrong in that cold open. It just didn't work, and then as you say, he just lent into his usual kind of sentimental bombast throughout and just threw you out of it quite a lot. And I suspect that he was trying to match really what is a very heightened experience on the screen, but in a way, it's a bit like that Coco Chanel thing that you should dress up, look in the mirror, and take one thing away.
yeah.
It's sort of like the music would have needed to be the thing that maybe just sat back, given how visually excessive this was in terms of what it
Absolutely.
was doing. So I agree with that completely. I also thought that like because I think he used what's it called, Lonely Man in a Box, the theme da 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 da
Mm.
the from the 11th Doctor during the fans bit.
Oh,
I
right.
suspect that is a joke that like in order to inject some emotion we need to think back to the Matt Smith era.
Mm.
Like a sort of riffing on the
Let me
Blink
guess,
thing
did
that
that
is
not
kind of
land with you?
it's more that it just I just felt it was excessive
Yeah,
to to do that, and it was bit of fan service that I felt was unnecessary given again what we were seeing on the screen. um I and also like little things like just from and I know this is, but oftentimes I find when I'm having loads of stuff thrown at me, and especially when there's a big meta element to this, which clearly there is, you are being instructed to watch this as a contextual experience rather than suspending your disbelief. Like that,
absolutely. Yeah,
you're being instructed to take a critical, to view this through a critical lens as you're watching it. The problem with that is then you begin to do that. And
yeah.
if you are applying a critical lens, you start to ask yourself questions like, what is this Lux guy trying to do? What
Mm.
is he? Um, if he's the god of light, why does he want to be cooped up in a room? If he's the god of light, why is a sun sufficient to bring him into a kind of transcendental state? I don't dramatically dislike what happened, that he becomes everything and nothing. That's a kind of big existential kind
Reminded
of
me a little
comment.
bit of the
But
end of the. Do you remember the anime Akira, where like basically
yeah,
the creature just keeps growing until he becomes everything? It was like, I mean, obviously that's far more grotesque in the anime than it was here, but
yeah, but also like, but but I'm trying to imagine like an 8-year-old kid and her mum watching this and sort of just going like, what the fuck?
yeah,
Um, and yet at the same time, I felt like that was really kind of underpowered, underexplained, hand wavy, typical kind of Deus Ex Machina kind of. Well, I mean, fair enough, it's gods themselves, but you know, like, but at the same time, there were everything else was signposted with almost kind of Brechtian intensity, like.
yeah,
I want to get back to my parents. I want to get, and so some stuff is given to you on a plate, and other stuff is just just go with it. And
yeah.
it felt kind of like you said. It didn't really for me cohere. Like I feel like I mean a lot. Russell T Davies gets a lot of. We talked about this a little bit recently when discussing the reaction to the 60th anniversary specials,
Mhm.
which I think well, you and I both really enjoyed. Um, and a lot of people were sort of I remember there being a lot of heat in fandom, more focused on Russell T Davies and what he was saying online on Instagram than actually what was on the screen. And yeah, I found myself thinking, because he does spend a lot of time on Instagram, so it would seem, and this felt to me like an episode of like grammable 30 seconds
Yeah.
rather than something that actually ran through. If you know, the comparisons are inevitably. You already talked about the McCoy. We both have comparisons are inevitably going to be made to Ghostlight
Yes.
because of the broad existential questions about humanity, loss, enlightenment, transcendentalism, and the central character having a kind of, well, light being
Yes.
Lux. There's a read through right directly, but Light's MO, like what Light was there to do, was probably the clearest thing in
Ghostlight. Yeah.
yeah. So you had a sense of, and it was a bit AI gone wrong, so it wasn't like a total villain, but like there was a clear read through of what this character was trying to do and why they would be frustrated. I didn't really have any handle on what Lux's motivation was.
No.
And I felt that that kind of underpowered, that left the tension rather underpowered in terms of what the Doctor and Belinda needed to get through.
And this is the thing that I think I remember feeling this sort of, or sort of thinking about this quite a lot in last year's series, you know, particularly around the Devil's Cord, but then obviously, you know, the following Davis episode 2 weeks later with 73 yards, which I remember sort of nailing down that. I mean, obviously, we've seen across his Doctor Who work and across his other work, like Davis can land pacing in classical plot structure. You know, it's like he can do it, and he can do it with the best of them. And there's very much a choice not to do that with these. It's like, this isn't, you know, the fact that this feels, you know, hand wavy at times, you know, this none of this arises out of incompetence, or in the case of, say, some of the season 24 writers, inexperience or anything like that. This is a mode in which he is operating, and he is making choices as to what is and isn't important. And stories like this and The Devil's Cord, I would say, they're sensory experiences, right? He's writing in a very sensory way, that it's about, you know, minute by minute, how is the sound and picture sort of coming at you off the screen. It is, you know, to use a vernacular, it is very much vibes based Doctor Who. The thing is, in a world, and particularly because there are certain aspects of this, of how Davis sort of has written over the last few years, that very much feel like a response, and you know, he's drawn inspiration from how Moffat wrote Doctor Who, you know, especially that kind of like very dense compression of it. You know, if you're going to, if basically to enjoy this, he's saying you've got to just be won over by the vibes and, you know, check the logic part of your brain at the door. Like, the vibes really have to be immaculate. And there are plenty of bits in this and in The Devil's Cord where it comes close in terms of just, you know, being so sort of arrested by what is being seen on screen, or like, as you say, a minute of a really amazing exchange or a little nugget of dialogue that just really sings. Like, it gets close, but it's a real high wire act because the entire package has to deliver, you know, on those vibes. And anything that harshes the vibe, like excessive music or something where you just feel the emotional intensity is in the wrong place, can really throw you out of it and start looking around at the rest of it. So
Yeah,
you know, it's a phenomenal high wire act he's attempting.
yeah, and like I say, like I mean, people's mileage will vary. I can absolutely see why a lot of people will love this, but as I say, when the kind of metatextual aspects are front and center, you are drawn to, literally as you're watching it, you're being invited to view it through a critical lens.
Yeah.
And that's like, that personally for me is when when the logic senses in my brain start to come to the fore, right?
Yeah.
If it's just a grand sweeping um, narrative, and it just so happens that the exact switch that someone needed to press happened to be right next to them at the point they needed it, I'm probably going to gloss over it. But when I'm being told, no, you have to kind of keep notes and make sure that you're following and see the kind of Easter eggs that we're leaving and what the nuggets are meant to represent and all the allusions that we're throwing at you, that's actually when I find those logic sensors switch on and come to the fore. And then I'm really sort of on edge about things that don't quite cohere.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about, you talked about Russell T Davies uh, aggressively biting the hand that feeds
Yeah.
by going right for Disney's short and curlies, the kind of the animation thing. I must say I really loved um when Lux starts to absorb the Doctor's regeneration energy, which is another whatever, sure, moment, like hand wavy, whatever. That he starts to become a CGI character, very much in the vein of the creepy Sonic. Oh my god, and he's grotesque enough as a kind of 20s 30s pastiche, but he's positively terrifying as the kind of fur and weird tentacles appear and all the rest of it. It's like, it's brilliantly done, and it's very nakedly a comment on how the focus on spectacle via CGI can come at the detriment of how updating this IP constantly can sort of lead you into don't want to say a Xerox of a Xerox kind of, because you're actually getting something clearer, but you're losing something in that translation. It just seemed a bit fucking rich coming from like season 85 of Doctor Who. It's like,
well, I do like that, and obviously this season, as we discussed at length, and we probably don't need to go into this aspect of it so much this week. I'm sure we'll have plenty more to think of the next couple of months. But the coming at a point where there's a lot of gnashing of teeth as to the potential future of Doctor Who, there is a read on this, which is that Davis has come in, he's come back to Doctor Who. The Disney deal, from what I understand, was very much cooked up, prior to him coming back on board as the showrunner. It was a deal for a fixed number of episodes, and we know that streaming dramas tend to be quite aggressively chopped. There is something to be said that I massively doff my cap to how he's gone, right, well, let's just make the least fucking Disney thing. Let's make the squarest peg that we can try to fit into this round hole. To the extent that, you saw how under Disney's stewardship at the franchise, Disney's stewardship at the Star Wars franchise, running in fear of the sort of the backlash to episode 8, for example. None of the Star Wars franchises, none of them would have attempted to, like, they'd have run a mile from a line of dialogue that literally refers to Planet of the Incels. And likewise, this is something I thought there was something quite obstinate in a really satisfying way about how this continually refers to, what is it, 24th of May 2025 all the way through, which is the date that, like, the last episode, or certainly the last, I need to check the calendar where it lines up, but penultimate, so that's the final story, basically. The last two-parter is going to be set, even down to Mrs. Flood popping up at the end saying the finale starts on 24th of May 2025, which obviously, in an era where we're sort of expected to see TV as existing in this non-linear amorphous space, and it drops at midnight on Disney Plus, and it'll be available on 8 a.m. and be broadcast at this time, for it to be really foregrounding that kind of like linear telly with a time slot kind of view. There's something satisfyingly bloody minded in it, saying like, right, okay, this is going out on Disney, so let's devour that hand.
Yeah, I rolled my eyes a bit at the Mrs. Flood stuff. Like, so we had the Susan Triad stuff last year. This year we're getting a bit more of the Mrs. Flood stuff. It's like, I'll just get it over with.
Oh, I'm sure we've not really talked about Mrs. Flood actually. I'm sure she will turn out to be like another of the gods, or I am not expecting a exciting revelation of who she is whatsoever. But I would say that I find Anita Dobson breaking the fourth wall every episode to be just a fun beat. She's fun. It's fun having Anita Dobson in Doctor Who as someone who talks to the camera. I have absolutely no investment in the mystery. I enjoy the beats.
I found it all quite tedious, but I did enjoy last week's "You Ain't Seen Me," which for 90% of the audience watching in other territories may not even see the fast show reference.
Yeah, totally.
That's just for us.
That's for us. That's one for us.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
So that, yeah. I found myself sort of watching this going, you know what, this reminded me so much of watching some of the Moffat stuff that I didn't really get along with, where I was watching this, oh, that's quite clever. But I wasn't really enjoying it as such. I can absolutely see why. I mean, lots of people loved everything that Moffat did, and I'm very pleased with these people. But
I would like nothing more than to really enjoy this. And the thing that I find really frustrating about the Disney era so far, in as much as we've seen it, and obviously still 6 episodes left to go this run, it comes close. It really comes close into something where I go just like, okay, actually, this is what I want Doctor Who to be. But it's just that last mile. There's been nothing that's gone out in the Disney era where I've gone, this is so far from what I want from this show. Unlike in the Chibnall era, it's just like it's just that last mile where sometimes it just trips over.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about Ncuti Gatwa and Varada Sethu? Because I think Ncuti Gatwa's fantastic. And I think, as you said earlier, that part in the diner is probably, we're into the second series, and it's probably the first time he's really got to do that really, really good dialogue. That kind of, he's emoted plenty. I mean, there's a lot. People have referenced him crying at the drop of a hat, but he's actually been given the dialogue to do. So he's not just reacting with a tear.
It's the new Doctor's speech to identify what he's about, right? In the way that Tom Baker's speech about Homo sapiens in Arc of Infinity, for example, or any number of those bullets of moral outrage that Pertwee would sort of spray out and stuff like that. It's
and the Tenants seem to get 5 times an episode.
Yeah.
But so I just thought it was a bit probably a bit late in the day, if I'm honest. But I never doubted that he could do it, and he delivered it fantastically. And so we're getting a bit more of a rounded view of who he is and what he is. And I think he's great. I still feel that throughout his era so far, he feels so underused.
Yeah.
I feel like the Doctor is routinely a bit part actor in his own stories, which, when you've got someone of Ncuti Gatwa's evident talent and ability
and sheer charisma.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like he's just sort of wildly underused. And I'm sure if you were to tally his screen time, but there's something in the construction of this era where he just doesn't feel. I mean, I know in the first series there were like 3 episodes where he literally wasn't there for very much time, but just generally he doesn't feel, even here where he's presumably there the whole time and he's on screen plenty, it just feels underused.
Yeah.
I continue, as I said last week, to just find the decision to swap for a new companion bizarre. Again, absolutely no criticism of Varada Sethu, but you've got 8 episodes and we're having to get along with a new character, and it just feels like the extra part of work that the television episode needs to do that we could have done without.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think it's really interesting actually, because it's like whereas Gatwa really been given the space to shine, and it's occasionally it is in these little quiet moments where he gets to sort of do something. And
well, the close. I mean, the best example is the final scene of Dot and Bubble, where he's
oh well, there's a few. Final scene of Dot and Bubble. That amazing sequence in the finale last year, which I generally didn't like as an episode, but where he's on the planet with the woman whose memory is going away, and he just hangs out with her. Even in a slightly more comedic bent, all the stuff with Anissa, the hotel clerk, in Joy to the World. That actually, if you give him the space, he can do that, and I think it is quite, that it's I mean, it's very different to Pertwee. I'm not saying they're doing the same thing in the way that you can sort of draw comparisons between, obvious comparisons between, say, Tennant and Tom Baker.
Nice threads, though.
Well, A, great dresser, and B, just that sort of that quiet, emotional, moral authority, which occasionally is allowed to come out, and just moments where he just gets to exhibit like kindness with a steely moral underpinning, of which he has been given a handful of those scenes, and those are obviously all the sort of standouts. And as I say, the until then I live in it and shine moment in this, but we'll add that to the list. I think it's just the compression of everything, the compression of all of the episodes, to cram in more ideas than they maybe have room to develop. The truncation of the amount of episodes. As you say, the fact that there was a whole run last year where he was unavailable to do it, which is, it's absolutely fascinating. It's like I've got a separate thesis going on about how, Doctor Who can always use more money, but it never benefits from the additional resources, because it always comes up with the same problems of just like scheduling and having to create a new set and a new world every week. And even with the most money that the show has ever been made with last year, they were having to write around the lead actor's availability and clearly recycle through a few sets towards the end of the run. It's like that Doctor Who is forever fated to do that, whatever budget tier it's made in. But yeah, I want to see more of him, and maybe look, 6 weeks to go. Maybe we'll get that. But yeah, you're right that he's underused. I think that's a good way of putting it.
I mean, maybe we are fated in an era of Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. I mean, certainly political. If I think about politics, right, a political speech, and Blair got this criticism like 25 years ago, so it's not like it's completely new, but it's certainly got worse, and it's kind of accelerated in how bad it's got. If you look at a politician's speech these days, it's not a kind of A to Z set of coherent arguments that builds up with a running thread. It's sort of just individual sound bites which can be sliced and diced for a news bulletin, although it's very infrequently the target these days, or for an Instagram reel, or for a YouTube short or something. And I think we're seeing perhaps the same impulse play out here, where I feel personally that as a coherent piece of 45-minute drama, you would actually need to just take back to Coco Chanel, but like I think 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these things should be pulled out, or you run some of this stuff over 2 episodes rather than trying to kind of force it all in. And again, we talked about Doctor Who in the era of streaming last week. I felt that theme and its presence very heavily here. Like, either run a story over a longer, Flux done well, as you said, as one model for how to survive this, or go anthology, but this kind of breakneck attempt to do all of that and to explore every facet of humanity and every social issue and bolt on new characters and just and create grammable moments so that the kids share it and like it and love it. Like it's just it's like creating a dish going, this is the saltiest, sweetest, most chili. We've added a whole jar of za'atar. It's just like it's just too much.
Too much. But then I would also say, compared to what we had a few years ago, I would say at least it's not flavorless. There you go. There you go. How's that now? We could clip that out as a little reel, couldn't we?
Oh, Matt.
I won't.
Oh,
I won't.
Matt.
I won't. Anyway, well, look, do let us know what you thought of Lux. What do we miss? What are we not getting here? Because from what I've seen, this went down exceptionally well. So yeah, I'm sort of intrigued by. I mean, the other thing with the sheer density, as you say, of how Davis is writing these things, there may well be little themes and subtexts that we've missed. So let us know. Get in touch.
I'd be very surprised if there weren't.
Well, there you go. That's a throwdown from I'll Explain Later's John West for you there. We had some correspondence last week from our episode on the robot revolution. Particularly, thank you very much to Lindsay Taylor on YouTube, who took the time to write a couple of very thoughtful comments, which I very much appreciated. Lindsay setting down. There were a couple of points that I just wanted to sort of raise from this. One is that we were talking about the themes of incel culture and toxic masculinity and how they make their home in the robot revolution, and Lindsay sort of raised a point which actually I hadn't thought about, which is that sort of Kinder really does gesture into that territory many years earlier with its sort of toxic man child wanting to control the world, which I'd not really made that comparison. But there was something else from Lindsay who said, I think they overused the Doctor crying in the first season, but for once I think the death of his companion in the last 6 months is sufficient justification for it. It's a really interesting start for a new companion to witness the death of the previous one, which I think is a really good point. Obviously, this is referring to Sasha 55, who we felt was the emotion. We felt that the emotional impact on the Doctor was somewhat unearned, given the amount of time that the audience had got to spend with her. But I can completely say I think Lindsay's right that on paper that is absolutely what Davis is going for. And to me, actually, if they had opened the episode, say, with Sasha traveling in the TARDIS with the Doctor, for example, like she'd already got to that point, and then she gets zapped a few minutes into the episode, a bit like how either Indira Varma's character in Torchwood or Lisa Faulkner's character in Spooks, where there's a bit of misdirection as to who's gonna make it out alive and stay in the central cast. But even if I think if Sasha had been introduced as the Doctor's companion, then at least our brains would have done the heavy lifting to go, right, this is what she means to the Doctor. We understand she's the companion and why the Doctor's upset. But I think it's a good point. I probably disagree that it worked in the context of the episode, but as a neat way of framing it and pointing out to how it could have worked better, I think Lindsay's bang on the money there.
It's so funny how Lisa Faulkner basically, in Spooks got her head deep fat fried and has subsequently become such a kind of celebrity chef kind of character. It's like he went from being an actor in Holby City and Spooks and is most famous for having her head cooked, and now she is the one doing the cooking in a very popular series of YouTube videos. And
has she ever used the deep fat fryer in any of them? I can imagine the comments are a nightmare under that.
I do know. She is, I believe, married to MasterChef judge John Turode. I guess her love of food is a big part of their relationship. I won't speculate further.
Wow. And in terms of...
Sorry, this took a turn, didn't it?
Absolutely. Well, it's very much in keeping of just cramming in as many ideas as we possibly could into the episode. But anyway...
Got to keep it grammable.
Anyway, let us know what you think. Leave a comment underneath this YouTube video with your thoughts. We welcome your feedback. You can get in touch with us via Blue Sky. Just search for I'll Explain Later on Blue Sky.
I'll explain later.
There you go. Or you can send us an email, hello@ I'llExplainLater.com.
He'll explain later.
There we go. Even I have to leave space for the lag on these remote recordings now in order for you to land that. Get in touch. Let us know what you thought. Otherwise, we will see you back here next week to talk about an episode of Doctor Who that no one has yet seen, other than people within the BBC and Disney, presumably, and maybe some of the press. So yeah, exciting times. But yeah, thanks so much for listening and for watching, and have a great week.
Bye.